continuing our investigation into the gateless barrier, day 4 of our session. Case 10. Qingshui, alone and poor. A monk said to Kosen, "I am Qingshui, alone and poor. Please offer some support." Kosen said, "Venerable Shui." Qingshui said, "Yes, master." Kosen said, "You have already drunk 3 cups of the finest wine in China, and still you say that you have not moistened your lips." Wumenguan says, Qingshui is submissive in manner, but what is his real intention? Kosen has the eye and thoroughly discerns what Qingshui means. Be that as it may, tell me, where and how has Qingshui drunk wine? Wumenguan's verse says, "With the poverty of Fandan and the spirit of Zhang Yu, though he can hardly sustain himself, he dares to compete with the other in wealth." So, we come to day 4, which is a middle day of our practice period here together. And so the form and the schedule, at least for most of us, is becoming familiar. The physical demands we're starting to acclimatize to. We're starting to find our rhythm, find our pace for the retreat. And as things begin to ease up, we can have a tendency to ease up ourselves as we head into an intensive period of practice. We have to really sort of be on our toes. There's a lot of challenges, physical, mental, emotional. We have to remember how everything goes. We have to physically show up for each part of the day. But as we start to find some space, as the physical component of practice begins to ease up a little bit, our temptation or our habit is to coast. We take this nice space that we've created, this wonderful environment of practice, and instead of applying ourselves to it, instead of continuing to engage with it, we just spend the time idly playing about in our mind, not paying attention to what we're doing, not engaged with our tasks, not walking around with our eyes open, just sleepwalking like a ghost. A horrible, wasteful way to spend your time here. This case involves 2 major characters. One is Qingshui, who is at first referred to as a monk, but in the case he is referred to by name, Qingshui. So it may be the case that he was a fellow of some renown in the day, in his time, because otherwise he would just be called a monk. Kaoshan is a very famous Zen master. In Japanese, his name is Sozan, and he was a disciple of another teacher named Tozan or Dongshan in Chinese. And so the two of them together are considered the founders of the Kaodong or Soto school of Zen. The So from Sozan and the To from Tozan becoming Soto. And so he was a teacher of some renown. And so what we have here is this Qingshui approaching a renowned master to ask him for help. Or at least so it seems. So let's investigate this question. A monk said to Kaoshan, "I am Qingshui, alone and poor. Please offer some support." So what's taking place here? Is it what seems to be on the surface? That Qingshui is going to Master Kaodong for a handout, maybe. But of course, if we look at it from a literal perspective, of course, he's alone and he's poor. He's a monk in China. And if he's approaching Master Kaodong like this, he's probably a wandering monk in China. So of course he's alone, and of course he's poor. And to some degree, so is Kaodong. He is also alone and poor. I'm reminded of a line from a Mel Brooks movie, "Beggars begging from beggars." So it's not just the physical, it's not just the superficial that Qingshui is talking about. Each of these cases of the Wumenguan, when we talk about them like this, one after the other, each one plays off the next. And when we're engaged in Zen, in koan practice, each one leads to the next. In many ways, the last aspect of the previous koan is the first aspect of the next koan. The last koan we talked about just last night was this non-attained Buddha. And I was talking about this principle that in the end, what is there to attain? How does Buddha nature, something that is fundamentally Buddha nature, become anything, let alone become Buddha? There is nothing to do. There is nowhere to go. There's nothing to attain. There's nothing to possess. And yet we always are trolling around seeking for that next thing, the next object, the next degree, the next job, the next relationship, or awakening, enlightenment. Pursuing it with the idea that it's something that we can possess, that we can have. That the company of the enlightened will be a place where we can belong. And I think that this is what Qingshui is referring to when he approaches Kaodong. He approaches in a very low fashion. He approaches as a humble monk, asking a reverend master for his help. But what he says is, I am Qingshui, alone and poor. Please offer some support. He makes a very bold statement. This alone and poor, I am without. I am without attachments. I am without fixations. I am without desires, without objectives, without direction. This please offer some support is nothing other than the old traditional request for give me a turning word. But Qingshui has brought this forward in such a refined way, very sort of duplicitous way, slippery way, subtle way. Wumen says that Kaoshan has the eye and thoroughly discerns what Qingshui means. This is an important aspect of Zen practice. One of the things that's very difficult in Zen practice is lacking the eye to see subtlety. Much of our practice is silent. The fundamental realizations that are an important part of, not important, it's not enough to say important. They're the very foundation of our practice. These things are at once present all around us, present in each and every aspect of our lives, but we need to develop the eye to see them. We need to become aware of this subtlety. And this is why in our practice we don't talk so much. This is why in our practice we don't always say things completely blatantly. We don't just spell things out in plain English. Because it is crucial, perhaps most crucial, for each of us to develop an eye that can see for ourselves, that can see the subtlety. If you're a person that just needs to have everything spelled out for you in black and white, there's a saying that like a grandmother peeling lychee nuts and placing them in your mouth so you just need to chew them. Maybe Zen isn't such a good place for you. Kongshan has this eye, and so when Qingshui approaches and he lays out this, he's probably been walking for a long time, concocting this phrase or this approach, this trap. And he lays it out in front of this master. What a tempting trap to a Zen teacher. Oh, I have nothing. I am destitute and sad. Please offer me something. How delicious. I think a lesser teacher would have sought to advise him or encourage him or instruct him. But Kosen sees through him, sees through the deception, sees through the approach. And instead of floating on the surface of his presentation and his question, he penetrates deeply and engages him. Hey! Hey you! He says, Venerable Shui! And that invitation, or that, it's not even an invitation, it's a sort of demand. Suddenly, a demand like that. Rinzai would shout, Huts! Or Obaku would hit him. And how does a person respond? This is a really important aspect of practice. And this is how we clarify where a person's practice is at in Zen practice. When we're coming into the Zendo and we make a mistake and we're corrected, no, like this, stop, lights on, lights off. How a person responds to that is a really clear indication of how that person's practice is developing. And there's actually nothing that you can consciously do about it. If we're still in a conceptual frame of mind and we're pointed like that, we're put on point like that through a correction, then it's freezing, or the activity ceases. We're pulled out of it, and we have to sort of look around and gain our bearings before we respond. And in that moment, there's a gap. And anybody with eyes can see the gap. Likewise, when you have somebody who has developed somewhat, or somebody who is engaged with the activity completely without separation, when you see that pointedness, when that correction is made, there is no gap. There is what I like to call a sudden pivot. The person is able to transform and pivot, go in a different direction. Also, there is no space for thought. There's no time to step out of the activity and to step back in. It's just one fluid motion. And this is what transpires between Kosen and Qingshui. Kosen calls him, Venerable Shui! And without thinking, without hesitation, the Qingshui strikes back. Yes! And probably right after went, Dao! Caught. Poor and destitute. Caught by his own trap. Caught by a better player, you might say. You can't play a player. Kosen said, You have already drunk 3 cups of the finest wine in China, and still you say you have not moistened your lips. Each of us, when we engage in practice, if we're really engaged in practice, it isn't to adorn ourselves. It's not about dressing up, having some kind of fun accessory through our spiritual practice. And some people, I suppose, do come to practice, whether it's Zen or some other spiritual tradition, in just this way. Some people might think, oh, well, life's pretty good, my work's good, my relationship's good, situation's good, my house is nice, my car's nice, got most things going, taken care of quite nicely. The one thing that's missing is I don't have much going on in my spiritual life, and generally people seem to think that would be really good. It'd be good to put on my resume, spiritual practice, so I should go get me some of that. But when people approach spiritual practice like that, my experience is that they don't last very long. They can play around with it for a little while, even sometimes quite aggressively, or really get involved very deep very quickly, but don't have roots. And so the first time there's an upsurge in difficulty, or the first time that there's any kind of ripple anywhere else in their life, it's the one thing that they can sort of cut and run. Now, I think that spiritual practice, if we're going to be serious about it, if we're going to sort of come at it with any kind of staying strength, it arises from a thirst. And this thirst is one way of expressing it. Dukkha is the traditional way in Buddhism. Dissatisfaction. We have some kind of perception that there is something bigger, a bigger picture, and we're not seeing it. And as we practice, as we deepen in our practice, our eyes are opened. At least if we're applying ourselves to practice wholeheartedly. And we begin to have moments where the pursuit ceases for a moment. We begin to have glimpses of fulfillment in things just as they are. When we have these kinds of experiences, when we wake up, one of the sort of real criteria that I look for when I'm talking to students about their practice, and they say, "Oh, I've had a realization," or "I've had an awakening experience," is whether or not there is a transformation in manifestation. Have they actually changed? Because invariably, a genuine realization impacts how we perceive the world. And how we perceive the world conditions our behavior and how we go about our day-to-day lives and make relationship. And as you deepen in your practice, as you become more and more familiar with practice and the experiences of realization, you also become clearer on seeing it in others as well, witnessing how a person takes care of their bowl set, watching how a person executes a simple task. I've been nearly moved to tears by watching how a person wipes off a table. So completely immersed that the practice is literally visible if you can see it. And this is what Kosen is pointing to. Qingshui comes forward like a pantomime almost. He says, I'm going to put on this hopeless character and lay it out in front. And Kosen, maybe for a moment, he thought, what's this? But then he sort of sticks in his dipstick. He says, okay, well, this will determine that shout or that invitation or that exhortation. Venerable Shui! Yes, Master. Just by his response. So, just by the way that he responded, yes, had no hesitation. There was no delay. There was no avoidance. There was no stuttering. Just a direct and confident and bright response. The cards are laid flat out on the table. You've already drunk 3 cups of the finest wine in China, and still you say that you have not moistened your lips. Wumen says, Qingshui is submissive in manner, but what is his real intention? Kosen has the eye and thoroughly discerns what Qingshui means. Be that as it may, tell me, where and how has Qingshui drunk wine? Oh, here I am, just peeling the lychees and putting them in your mouth. Wumen's verse. This is a great case because Qingshui is such a wonderful personification of the spirit of practice. Mark Morse, is an artist who has a website called The Gateless Gate, and he's done a whole bunch of illustrations. He's done illustrations for all of the cases in the Gateless Barrier, and recently he just made a half pipe, like a skateboard ramp. And it's got a really cool illustration of Bodhidharma on it. And it says, 7 times fall down, 8 times stand up. And this is a famous saying that's attributed to Bodhidharma. And this is the spirit of Zen practice. Generally, when we're learning a skill, we like to learn in a very comfortable and slow way. So our progress or our pace forward tends to be very slow and careful because we don't want to fall down. We don't want to make mistakes. And when we're learning a role, for example, in the Zendo, or when we're engaged in any aspect of Zen practice, our tendency is to be very kind of shy and cautious because the corrections are so direct and blunt and public. And we much prefer in our culture, and I think every culture, a policy or an idea of discipline in private and praise in public. And we try to avoid that kind of shame because we attach what we're doing, the activity that we're engaged in, with who it is that we think we are, our value as a being. And so if we make a mistake and we're corrected for it, we're not just having our specific error kind of pointed out to us as well as to everyone in the room, but we feel like we're actually having our value diminished. We're somehow becoming lesser because we've been corrected or because we've made a mistake. And you see this even on Tuesday nights and even with first-time people. That's how common this kind of attitude is. That we can come into something that we've never done before. We've never had any experience of it before. But our greatest hesitation is that we don't want to be seen as a beginner, or we don't want to be seen as not totally knowing what we're doing, not being an expert. And that attitude or that approach to life is one that really kind of retards our development, because we develop or we learn so much from making mistakes. We learn so much from falling down. But we so often become so afraid of falling down that we don't take a risk. We don't reach out. If we assess the situation and we say, oh, the opponent is clearly stronger than me, I shouldn't even bother, I shouldn't even try. We never think, oh, by playing with that person, sure, I'm going to get my butt kicked, completely handed to me, but I bet you I'll learn a lot. And that's the spirit that's pointed to in Zen practice and in this case. And this is the spirit of Qingshui as he approaches Kosen. He really, he is an accomplished practitioner. As I said, it's sort of attested to by the use of his name in the text. He's not just some monk. He was a practitioner of some repute. Clearly, he wasn't as well known, at least at this time, or well developed as Kosen. But he steps up. And he's not stepping up to best him out of some kind of ego-driven motivation where like, oh, watch me rock old Kaoshan, I'll show everybody and maybe I'll get into the gateless barrier, something like that. He's motivated by a desire to deepen his own practice. And in truth, I can say, when you step into the role of teacher, you really can't step into the role of being a teacher with the attitude that you're done either. But that you're actually kind of putting yourself, you're painting a big target on yourself when you step up as a teacher. Like in these old texts, I mean, like, you know, we have them over and over again where these people stand up and they say stuff to the teacher. They just throw down a glove, and the teacher's job is to respond to it over and over and over again. And so the teacher is approaching the circumstance also from a perspective of, what's it going to be today? Linji gives these modes of meeting, guest meeting guest, and guest meeting host, and host meeting host. And this is how these Zen interactions, our meetings, are. Qingshui really demonstrates this clearly. And this is what Wumen's verse is all about. With the poverty of Fandan and the spirit of Zhangyu. Fandan, it's a folk story about a fellow who had a job in the government, but sort of got caught up in some sort of complications, not necessarily of his own doing, and had to leave his occupation. And for the rest of his life, he spent it very poor as a fortune teller, wheeling his wife and children around in like a wheelbarrow. That's how poor he was. They couldn't afford anywhere to live. He just wheeled them around in this wheelbarrow. This is the poverty, the spiritual poverty, the sort of willingness, the hunger, I use this term sometimes, close to the ground. It's always a good position to be close to the ground. You can learn a lot being so close to the ground. And so this is what this is pointing to. With the poverty of Fandan and the spirit of Zhangyu. Zhangyu was this, apparently a legendary general in China. And he won many battles, and he was a brilliant strategist and all this kind of stuff. And then there was this big war, and essentially he was on the losing side. And very early in the battle, he realized, like, there's no winning this battle. And so instead of he didn't even go to the battle. He just had a big party in his tent. And when they found him, he was drunk and singing a song about having the will to move mountains. And he's a kind of a heroic figure of courage, hearted, like a big-hearted courage, fearlessness. And this is what Wumen is praising this Qingshui for stepping up into the impossible circumstance for the benefit or for the function of clarifying his Dharma eye, clarifying the Dharma. How wonderful. Though he can hardly sustain himself, he dares to compete with the other in wealth. Just early in his practice, or just finding his feet in practice, early in the way. Another monk, running into Kalshan might just bow and, oh, Master, please offer some words of Dharma. Oh, please lead us in a round of sitting meditation. But Qingshui throws down the glove, knowing that there's going to be a smackdown and it's going to be him. But he knows that he's not going to die. He knows that it might be embarrassing. He knows that it might even hurt a little bit. But he also knows that there will be a teaching, a much more direct, much more powerful, much more clear teaching that is manifest in this interaction. Each of these cases, I always like to remind us, is an opportunity for us to investigate all aspects of ourselves. The gateless barrier is the closest thing that I've ever come across to an owner's manual for being a human being. It takes a little bit, just like an owner's manual for most complicated things. Sometimes it's a bit dry or confusing. It takes some time of looking and thinking and reflecting before we understand what it's talking about, what it's pointing to. Our practice in investigating or introspecting a koan is to take up the different aspects of the case personally. Each of these scenes, each of these interactions and characters are also manifestations of our original nature, of ourselves. Most of us, when we read a case, immediately connect or relate to one aspect or another of a case. And that's okay. That's the way that it is. But if we're going to really engage with these cases, our practice is to pivot, is to morph or transform into another aspect of the koan, of the case, and to contemplate what it is, what this interaction is, what this demonstration is, from every possible angle. So we have this time together to practice. And we can tolerate it. We can count our minutes from meal to meal, if we like. We can fulfill the tasks that are asked of us sufficiently. We can follow the schedule obediently, be on time for everything. It's one way of doing practice, ticking a box. while we think about other things or make plans, fantasize. But this is to just allow really great wine to pass us by without ever moistening our lips, as this case says. Particularly this week, we have an opportunity to engage an environment that's been crafted and constructed and upheld and just held for the express purpose of drinking it in. Completely, like submerging yourself, it's like a vat of wine and you just cannonball into it. It's really that set up that way. You can always drink. Our whole lives are an opportunity to drink of this wine, to immerse ourselves in our daily activities and to realize our nature. But this week is really, sometimes in our daily lives, people who are in relationship don't really care. They're not concerned about you immersing yourself in the Dharma activity. They don't give a fig if you are clarifying your Dharma eye. But this week we have an opportunity and a place and the time and the support to drink deeply. So in each activity, whether we're cleaning bathrooms or eating our meals or doing work practice or engaging in yoga or hiking or going to the bathroom or having a cup of tea, drink deeply. Don't waste your time. Don't waste the time of everybody who has given their lives to this practice. Every day during this intensive, we chant this big, long list of really difficult to pronounce names. And each and every one of those people have literally given their lives to bring this practice forward to the next generation. Many of them with no hope of acknowledgement, no aspiration of being recognized. Some of them we've had to sort of intentionally go into the past and dig up their names because they've just been forgotten. End to end, giving their lives to bring this practice, bring this opportunity to drink forward. So the invitation is there to drink, to immerse yourself, to sink in and engage with the practice that's unfolding, your life as it's unfolding. Don't live like a ghost, just skimming along the surface, fantasizing about what will come. This is a sad regret to reach the end of your life and realize that your whole life you weren't there. You were just skimming along the surface thinking about what was coming next. So drink deep.